upcoming presentation and you want to make it the best presentation possible. This is when presenter mode comes into focus. So presenter mode is really easy to use in PowerPoint, and ultimately what it does is it allows you to not have a whole bunch of content on your slide like this, and instead you're able to use the Notes tab and use presenter mode to have less information on the slide that the audience sees, but more information that you can see in your notes. So here you all see this amount of information, but in my presenter mode, I can see this. So presenter mode, I can control how big each of these sections are by hovering over this and changing the size of them. I can also change the size of the text by hitting Control on a PC or Command on a Mac and scrolling with my mouse, or down here I can also do the same with these options here. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that if you are using a scrolly wheel on the mouse and I make these notes really big, or I just have a lot of notes, I can scroll through these, but I want to be really cautious that my mouse stays here. Because if my mouse comes over here, I'm going to scroll through my slides. So you just want to be careful not to have too much information or that you have to scroll a lot, because it can just make it a little bit harder. So this is great because presenter mode allows you to have less information on the slide when you want to talk about it, and more that you can remember what you want to say in your notes section. And this is really helpful because I can toggle back in between this so that if I want to, I can swap this so that you all see this, but I can see my notes. And this is helpful because we can't read and hear at the same time. So if you have ever been like typing something up and someone comes by and starts talking to you, you'll notice that you start writing what you're typing or saying what you're writing. You can't do both at the same time. We cannot have a different thought of words in our head as what we're typing, as what we're saying. But we can process visuals at the same time as when we're hearing them. So that's why a slide like this is going to be more effective than a slide full of text. Now, if I come back to my presenter mode over here, you can see that I have a couple other options down here. So first is your pen and laser pointer tools. So you can use this to bring attention to something on the slide itself. So I have laser pointer, I have pen, highlighter, all of these. I can also change my ink color. And so I particularly like the pen one because then I can actually draw. So if I want to say like, hey, pay attention to this section on the slide, I can do that. I can then erase it by coming back over here and just erasing that content. I also have the slide sorter, which is really helpful if I have a large presentation deck and I'm having Q&A. So if my audience asks me something and I didn't know if I would get time for it, I can have different sections in my presentation, and I can also have hidden slides that I'm not going to get to unless someone calls it out or unless I have time for it. So I click on this and you'll see over here I have the sections. So just to look at this first, you can see I have these sections that are named whatever they are. And if I had a whole bunch of slides, it would take me to those sections as I go there. I don't have a bunch here, so you don't see them. The other thing is that I can see all of the slides that I have. So these are hidden slides, which means that you didn't see this one when I went through here to here. I went 3 to 5. But if I want to talk about this, I can. And then I have that content here. And then I can just go forward like I would normally and have that content here. The other thing is that if I have an animation, so this next slide, I have this, and then you can see in this smaller section up here with the next slide, that shows me the next animation. So if I have animations, it reminds me, hey, there's a thing that I need to click on so that this will appear. So slide sorter can be really helpful. If I click on this and I decide, no, I want to just stay on the same slide, it'll take me back to exactly where I was. It's not going to take me back to the beginning animation. I can always go backwards and have that disappear by hitting the side, your left arrow, or I can hit backspace to have it appear or disappear, either one. So that's slide sorter. Zoom is great if I have a whole bunch of content on my slide and I need you to zoom into a specific section. I can do that. So I'm like, hey, instead of saying, I know you can't read this, but this is how I can get everyone to be able to read this. I can also then move around. So if I have this really big graphic here, then I can move around that way and have you come back to it. And then this next one is making it black or white. You can use this. I prefer the B key, which does the same thing. So B makes the slide black and also come back. W makes it white and come back. This is the subtitles that you're seeing right now. You have a bunch of options when it comes to subtitles, which you can come over here to your settings, and I'm going to make a separate video about that goes into more detail about that. But ultimately this is great because if I'm sharing my slide, I'm doing a virtual presentation and I want to move this around, you do have to do this shrinking button first before you move it to a different screen. But then if I want to display my speaker notes here, because that's where my camera is, I can swap them so that you all see this, but I see my notes directly in front of me, and that I can then look at the camera and then make sure that I see my notes there. So a couple options to think about with that in terms of your presenter mode. But the main thing is you want to use presenter mode because you don't want to use a ton of bullets, because it overwhelms your audience. It makes them unable to process what you're saying. They're missing out a lot of that content because they're reading what you've written on the slide and their working memory gets overtaxed and they can't process everything. So try and use presenter mode next time. Put your notes that came from the slide into the notes on the presentation deck, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. But I do just want to say, I am Danielle Hennis. I am a presentation consultant and I help people design their presentation slide deck, because personally I am a graphic designer, and I help people in whatever form of presentations that looks like, whether it's content, whether it's slide design, whether it's feeling more confident, whether it's PowerPoint help, and I can help you present better and make your presentation more effective. So in PowerPoint here, what you'll see is here's the note section, and if I scroll up and down here, if I just click and hover, if you don't have it, you just hover on the bottom and click up, that's going to give you the option to add the notes. So for example, this one had a bunch of notes. I can turn these into bullets if I want. If I want to bold something, I can do so. I can underline it and do italicize, but that's kind of the extent of the options that you have there. You can change the size of things in the notes. So there's no point in really changing it here, but this allows you to have more control over it. And then if you want to add these sections, then you just right click here and say add section. I name that section whatever I want, and then I have it there. If I decide I don't want it anymore, then I can always remove the section or rename the section, and I can add more slides. So for example, if I have a whole bunch of new slides and just add a whole bunch of them, and I go back to my slideshow for a second so that you guys can see what that looks like with the slide sorter. Then now you can see if I click on the subscribe section, it's going to bump up there. So it's a way in which you can kind of, or if I increase the size of the slides, you'll see that better. So that'll pump up to the introduction, down to subscribe. So if I have a whole bunch of content I'm going to talk about, then that's going to allow me to kind of bump between those sections a lot easier. And this is a great way to organize your content, so that way if you have more audience interaction, or you don't know if you're going to get through everything in the presentation, but you want to easily be able to jump around, you're not scrolling through all these slides and you're not saying like, okay, next slide, next slide, next slide, but you're instead able to control what the audience is seeing at the same time. So hopefully that was helpful. I hope that for your next presentation that you are able to use presenter mode, and I hope that you are able to like, comment, and share this if this was helpful, and subscribe for next time.